Hey, this is Michael Margolis, president of Get Storied, and I'm the author of Believe Me, a storytelling manifesto for change makers and innovators. And I'm here at the Bridge Conference and just gave a keynote. And some of the things that we talked about was really the notion of storytelling. Now, I know storytelling is something a lot of you are hearing about these days. It's kind of a big buzzword and trend. But the way that we usually think about storytelling is performance, telling an anecdote. And while I'll share with you a couple things that might be helpful for you to remember, storytelling is something that's much bigger. So a lot of what I spoke about today is really about narrative and how to think in narrative. What's the bigger story that you're working on and how to communicate it? One of the funny things that I discovered myself, I've been a social entrepreneur for over a decade, and what I found was even when you have the most world-changing ideas, and even when you have the most rational logic behind it and business plans and lots of money, doesn't mean that your idea will always translate into success. And that's what brought me into the notion of storytelling. And what I discovered is that most people don't buy the product or the solution or the idea. What people buy is the story that's attached to it. So what people think in their heads when they're buying your product. And for most brands today, there's a lot of different stories that are out there. So if you're Starbucks, for instance, some people love Starbucks, some people don't like Starbucks. Again, it's all about the story that people are telling themselves. Walmart, McDonald's, as well as many other various different charities and causes, different people have a different story in their head. So it's something you need to think about in your own communications and brand, and especially with so many folks these days who are going through identity shifts and thinking about how to tell a new story and become relevant again. So here's three things for you to consider. Number one is actually give people something that they can become a part of. There's a reason why those yellow wristbands by Live Strong sold millions and millions. It's because it gave people a way that they could actually identify themselves. They bought into the story and they wanted it as a marker. Okay, the second thing to think about is your backstory. Every organization has a backstory, and people need to know that backstory because they want to know, are you for real? That's the question you need to answer in people's minds, right? When you're looking at a regular product in the supermarket shelf, especially a new product, it tells the backstory. Like Tom and Tom were two guys out of college, and they were working on Nantucket, and they were making smoothies on their boat, going around talking to people. Next thing you know, they had a company called Nantucket Nectars. We want the backstory. It's how we locate ourselves and figure out if we belong. So look back at your own backstory and think about how are you making your story accessible. Now the third thing to think about is your story big enough? And this is what I mean. Well, so many of us as nonprofits, we've learned really a way to tell the story is it's about crisis. It's about shock and awe, getting in front of people, telling them about how bad things are. Well, the sad reality is that when you take that sort of an approach, it actually alienates people, creates a fight or flight response in our system that makes people either disagree with what you have to say or just put their head in the sand and go apathetic. We all know donor fatigue is going on. So the notion of finding the larger universal story is about going back to basics at a more human level. We talked, for instance, of an example of Amnesty International. There's a part of Amnesty as an organization that is pretty staunch in its beliefs. It's a very activist organization. And some of their direct mailers actually say, the free have a responsibility to remember the oppressed. Right? That's a very moral stance to take, and one that might speak to their activist core, but it prevents Amnesty from really moving its way back into the mainstream. Ironically, on the same direct mail piece, on the back side, it says that prisoners of conscience are not alone, which is the core story. This is really the story of Amnesty back in the day in the 80s, why I loved Amnesty International as a teenager. Right? It was the notion of taking a little piece of paper, putting a note on it, and knowing that would go to a prisoner of conscience and letting them know they were not alone. So think about that in your own organization. Usually the bigger story is hiding in plain sight, and yet there's lots of other competing storylines that are fighting for attention and create the noise, which is why then the people, your constituents, your donors, your members, the people you're trying to reach, why they don't connect in the same way that they used to connect with your story. So if you want to learn more, check out getstoried.com. That's our website. You can actually download a free digital copy of our storytelling manifesto, and welcome for you to reach out and make a connection. Hope this was helpful. Have a great day.